Pierre, you are host again.
All right.
Hey, Rosanna, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. I am iPhone 13 Pro Max,
Yep. You want me to
Kyle
change it?
Clark.
Who's it? Is Clark? Paul?
Yeah, it's Kyle.
Oh, Kyle. Sorry. I'll change it to so we know who it is. All right.
FYI, we are live streaming right now.
Morning, Mary.
Good morning. How are you doing, Pierre?
I'm good. I'm good. Morning, Kyle.
All right, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. I had some technical issues. Think I'm good now.
No problem. Good morning. I think we're waiting for a few other people. Morning, Joel. Joel. Need me to record the meeting, right, Rosanna?
One more time.
Can't you say something, Rosanna? Yeah, I can't hear you.
Hold on.
Can you hear me? Nope. Nada.
Can you hear me?
Nope.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah. can hear you now.
I'm hearing you like delayed.
Who, me?
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah. Can hear you now.
It's delayed on my part.
Okay. Do you want me to record it?
Sure, Pierre, record it. Sure, Pierre, record it.
Is that the live stream causing that delay?
I think so. I think so.
All right, because I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you fine. I can hear the echo in the background on yours, so. I guess we're just waiting for Danny.
I think so.
Hi, everybody. This is Chairman Hill.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for setting this up so that multiple board members could just listen in and get an update. There are so many things going on right now. It's good to be able to come together and understand the timelines and action items. So thank you.
Here's Greg. Morning, Greg.
Morning.
Pierre, I don't know how to fix that delayed.
I'm assuming that's the live stream issue.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to do that either. So, but I can hear you fine. I can see your lip. There's no delay on you on this side. That's the live stream. I'm assuming that is echoing is delayed a little bit. Can you not hear me now? Raise
I
your
can
hand.
hear you.
Yes, I don't think there's a delay here. So is Danny coming in?
I'm not sure. I sent him the invite, so let's just get started, please.
Okay. Everybody can see the presentation, yeah?
Yes, we can see it.
Do y'all want me to just jump into the projects? I don't, because it's a public meeting, I don't know if there's formalities y'all have to go through before we jump into that.
No, it's not it's not we're not going to follow the typical agenda with the Pledge of Allegiance and whatnot. I can just say, as the chair of the Ocean Highway and Port Authority, I made the decision to have a public meeting so that other members of the board would be able to participate, given the short timelines that OHPA and Nassau terminals will need to respond in order to mobilize local funding from Nassau terminals, and also to ensure we have the appropriate agreements in place so that we can not miss this current grant cycle for our resiliency projects primarily, and also for other projects that are in the pipeline, just to understand where we are, like with customs. So that was the reason for the short notice on the public meeting, and so thank you, Rosanna, for setting that up. And I'll turn it over to you, Kyle, just to go through our status on FDOT projects. Thank you.
Perfect. And what I was going to offer too, thinking about this, and I know Rosanna had to try to pull this all together quickly, but if it would be helpful, I'm not going to commit that I can come to every meeting, but if y'all want DOT to come maybe once a quarter, maybe 3 times a year to a board meeting, and just do this presentation and run through the grant so all the commissioners can see it. That's something we can totally work out and get on the schedule. So just keep that in mind if we want to do that in the future.
Thank you.
All right, Pierre, in an effort to kind of save everyone, maximize everyone's time, the first 22 pages of this document are just all compliance requirements for DOT grants. We don't need to go through this, but here's a reference. Every presentation we ever give, you're going to see it. So this is basically everything we need for mostly for construction projects, not so much for planning level projects. So anyways, I include it as documentation and information for you to reference. And if you have any questions, reach out to me and we can clarify. But page 23 right here is kind of where the project starts. So just to tell you all how I organize them, I kind of put all the projects, they're not, the first 5 or 6 aren't organized, but I put the CBP grant at the end because I know Rosanna mentioned there were some questions about that one. So we'll just jump into this one. The first one is G1K57. This project is actually complete. I think Pierre invoiced us about a month or 6 weeks ago, maybe. We drew down all the funds. I need to give Rosanna, I need to go through the project and see what documents do we not have that we need to close the grant. So this one's in my court. Rosanna, I'll get you something in the next few days that kind of accounts for what documents are outstanding that we need in order to fully close out this grant. But good job spinning this one down. I was happy to see it all the funding getting used.
And just to be, Rosanna, just to be clear, the OHP participation is being paid for by Savage or World Nassau Terminals, yeah? Okay. Okay.
All right, unless anyone has any questions on this one, we can kind of consider this one closed. Hopefully we meet next month. I'll have gotten with Rosanna, got everything we need. This one will fall off the list of grants. All right, next one is G1W55. This is the one that was supposed to expire in March. And when Commissioner Nelson became the liaison, he asked that we consider extending it 6 months. And I think Savage at that time had a pretty good plan in place to get this done. So we extended contract time to September 30th, which means you've got about 4 months left. But as you can see, there's a significant amount of funding. There's not been any billing against this contract, and there's about $750,000 remaining. So Savage, or who can speak this one best, where are y'all kind of at with procurement and getting a contractor and all that stuff?
Hi, Kyle. I can update on this one. So the building construction is complete. And
Cool.
the question I had for you is, now we're just working through some final permitting things, getting certificates of occupancy and stuff like that. Are we all set to go ahead and submit for reimbursement, or do we need to wait until all the certificates are complete?
No, you can go ahead and invoice us as long as we'll need to come out. I'll have to get with you, Kyle, and schedule some time. I have to come out and come on the port and document the project and take some photos. So I can reach out to you and get that on the calendar. But no, anytime, you don't have to wait till the project's complete to invoice us. So we actually prefer that you guys work on the project for a month or two and send regular kind of smaller invoices, incremental invoices. But you don't have to wait till the project's complete to invoice us. So if y'all have accrued charges that y'all have, OHPA has canceled checks for, or bank statements showing they paid, then invoice us for them.
Great. We'll get right to work on that. Then you and I can coordinate on a site visit here soon.
Yep, I'll send you an email today and see if we can find some dates and times that work.
Awesome. Thank you.
And with that, Kyle, just one question. Do you anticipate that construction will fully draw down these funds or mostly draw them down?
We anticipate it'll fully draw down the funds.
Okay, great. All right, very good. Anyone have any questions on this one? All right, hearing none, Pierre, if you want to click us over to the next slide. Okay, this is G1938. This is another one that kind of has a large remaining balance of $803,000. This one will expire at the, 2 days from now it expires. So I guess my question here would be, has any further work occurred, or can we just proceed to closing this one out and releasing the remaining balance?
Yeah, Kyle, at this point on this particular one, we're all set to close it. This is the one we were trying to extend to address some of the challenges at the berth and the north ramp. But at the time we entered the conversations, we just didn't have enough timeline left to get those projects underway.
Yeah. And for Chair Hill, just so you know, DOT's stance on this one, we generally don't allow grants absent of some extenuating circumstance to go longer than 5 years. So when we requested to extend this one, you can see it started in 2019 with an end date in 24. It was already 5 years long. Had y'all been in construction and nearly done, we probably would have added a month or two to get you through the construction phase. But since there was no construction begin or even in process, we couldn't extend it.
Understood.
All right, I'll look at that one, Rosanna. This is another one. We'll probably need some documentation for the dredging work that did happen. I think most of the funds that were expended were related to the berth dredging back when Mr. Ragucci was there. So I need to look to see what we got at that time, but I need to send you an accounting again of documents we'll need to close out the grant. All right, next one, Pierre. All right, the next one is G 1943. This one is basically drawn down. There's still about 110,000. I thought from our last conversation, y'all were still waiting on some parts to come in. Did those parts make it in by May 21st?
Yes, they did. We
Okay.
spent quite a bit more on this. We didn't get a full spend, but Mary's working on some invoicing right now, and her and Rosanna have been going back and forth on getting some paperwork sent over.
I guess for DOT purposes, we should anticipate one more final invoice to draw some portion of the 110,000 down.
I think it's coming through in 2 batches, from what I understand. We have a cluster we're working on right now, and then there's one more invoicing following
Okay.
that.
Just remember, I have to go look at the contract. I think it allows 120 days after expiration for y'all to submit a final invoice. So May, that runs you through June, July, August. We need something by the middle of September, so in order to pay it.
Sounds great. Our timeline's much more aggressive than that. I'm anticipating a couple weeks.
Okay, great. All right, next one is G 2437. This one was largely related to like fenders, mooring devices, those types of things. There's still a significant amount of contract time, about 2 years left, but there's been no billing activity for this one yet. So where are y'all at with this one currently?
We're real excited to kick this one off here. We've gone ahead and identified the project that we're going to do, which will fit within the upgrading mooring devices.
Okay.
We're collecting quotes right now. We anticipate kicking this project off in about a month or so.
Perfect. And
we're anticipating full spend. The project we've identified is right now we're about $10,000 over.
okay.
So we'll use the whole grant.
So talk me through how this works. Y'all are kind of calling around getting quotes, and then OHPA puts a bid package on the street, and I guess you hope that everyone that gave you quotes pursues the bid package?
That's how it went on the building. Yeah. We put some feelers out there and start to get some interest up. And then we worked with David to put together an RFP. And then we reached back out to the people that, we had got the interest from and asked them to check out the RFP.
Okay. I just want to make sure that OHPA is going to do some type of RFP, RFQ, because that is a requirement. So as long as that's in y'all's plan, that will not cause any issues for DOT.
Yeah, we're still figuring that out. The last time I went through this, we did have David, so we've just got to figure out the new procedure on how to involve OHPA and how to get that RFP out there. But we'll coordinate with them.
Okay.
We could put it on the agenda for the next meeting if you like, Kyle and Greg. And Patrick will advise just on, what the statutory requirements are for, bidding versus, publishing an RFP. But yeah, if we're going to do an RFP, we just want to get it out there sooner than later so that we don't get into a crunch where we only have less than a month or so to advertise. That's really the biggest concern. So it should track the same process as before.
Great, thank you.
Cool. I think that's it for that one, unless anyone has anything else on that one. This is the ARPA funds. They're largely drawn down at this point. I would imagine 1 to 2 more invoices. I think the last time I talked to Pierre about this, they're on track to be drawn down by September or October. So then the funds will be fully exhausted. So
Correct. Yeah, we're going to probably submit one more invoice.
Okay.
So it'll be, yeah, sometime probably September, October. Yeah.
okay, that works for us. So we'll be on the lookout for that kind of towards the end of the summer. Okay, this is the final grant in this package of grants. It is the CBP.
I'm sorry, could you go back one more slide? Could you just go back one more slide just so I could see the ARPA amounts? Okay, so it's 806 and we have 60,000 left.
Correct.
Okay, and that's expended, but it just hasn't been submitted.
I think y'all.
The
I
60,000.
think it's for like salaries y'all are incurring today.
Right.
Correct. So we've
They need
submitted
to
for
incur through
reimbursement.
August or September and then invoice us for, that quarter of salaries or so.
Right. So yeah, we've submitted through April of 2024 salaries. And so May, June, July, August, essentially we'll use up the remaining balance as we pay those salaries out and we submit for reimbursement at that point.
Okay. And Kyle, compared to other ports, how much are other ports fully spending down all of this funding?
All the big ports drew down their funding in a matter, because you got to imagine big staffs, hundreds of people. They drew down their funds. So the JackSports, the Miamis, Canaverals, Tampas, they drew down their funds in a matter of weeks or months. For the smaller ports, I think y'all are on track to fully draw yours down. I think there's 2 or 3 ports that are in question if they will even use all their funding. But it was everyone in that situation was smaller ports with small staffs that just didn't have high monthly burn rates. This who seemed to kind of have difficulty spending all their funding.
Okay. And for ours, we did initially want to give some of that funding to the port employees, but ultimately there was an issue with the way the operating agreement had been procured, that it didn't meet federal procurement standards.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I mean, I think the crux of the issue was the grant covered OPA employees and not OPA's contractors' employees was kind of the crux of the issue. But I do remember we got into the operating agreement, and I don't remember the details. But you are correct that we were unable to. I know at one point y'all wanted to provide them with some type of bonus for working through COVID.
Right.
Right. We also tried to
not
submit security.
doable from a grant perspective.
Yeah, we also tried to submit security invoices and some other things.
Yeah, and I remember some of the vendor issues were that they weren't procured with the federal guidelines. Y'all kind of followed the state less restrictive procurement process, whereas the feds have they have a lot more language and other stuff that they require to be inserted into their procurement.
So are there other ports that have indirect, like an operating agreement where they don't have the direct employees? And did they find a workaround for giving some payments to the employees?
I don't know of anyone who was able to pay employees other than their direct employees. So like JackSport, right? We paid for essentially their entire staff for a month or 2, but it was only for JackSport staff. It did not extend to say their ILA workers or their tenants workers or anything of that nature. It was purely the port staff.
Okay. And did Greg, I know this might have been before your time, but I thought that the port employees did receive some PPP funding or payments. I just want to know whether we met that commitment or whether that commitment was ultimately met indirectly by Nassau Terminals, or where we stand on that. Did they get a payment?
I'd have to follow up. We can look into it though.
Okay. And it's only because we only have this $60,000 left, and that was a commitment that the board made, was to pay something to the employees. And we have so many longtime employees that it really does distinguish our port, that we have 25-year employees that have been with our port, their whole careers. And, a lot of them are, minorities and, folks that there really isn't another job here locally that would be like this. So, and it's kind of a special thing we have going that we have such great people out there. And
So,
go ahead, Pierre.
so I think two different things, right? So obviously what we could be reimbursed for by the grant are the salaries of the OHP commissioners.
Right.
What we can spend the money on once we have it. So we'll have enough salaries to essentially get all the grant refunded from, or use this grant by the end of the year. Right. So because of the OHP salaries, there's no restriction on what we do with the money once we have it.
Okay.
Yeah, DOT's oversight kind of ends at you presenting us with salaries, paychecks, us reimbursing you for those checks. What y'all decide to do with your budget beyond that is not of our concern. So when you asked about a workaround, I think that's what I've seen some of the ports do. They may have been able to give money to, say, tenants, but they did it via shifting the port employee salaries to DOT, which then freed up some of their budget that they were able to reappropriate to provide relief funding to other employees.
And I did read something in that ARPA guidance about like use of like a nonprofit organization to provide a direct benefit to like frontline workers, but I never heard an example of how that had been done.
I didn't hear any of the ports in Florida doing that. I know there was also some stuff about, I want to say job training, maybe the funds could be used for. Or retraining people impacted by COVID that had to look for other jobs, but there was some unique stuff that was eligible.
Okay.
And
Great.
that's eligible for reimbursement. As opposed to, like I said, we have, because the port salaries are already covered by the fixed costs of the port operator. Essentially, as Kyle said, you can shift, now we've shifted those salaries to the ARPA funds, which means that now those fixed costs that we receive can be used for other things, whatever we want. And we've been using them. I mean, that's how we funded legal fees. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
over
that makes
the
sense.
4-year term of this grant, it should have freed up by the end of it 806,000 of OPA dollars that otherwise would have funded salaries and so on and so forth.
And it has.
So
freed
it
up
sounds
those
like OPA can do whatever they want with this money. It almost doesn't matter what was spent in the past. If 60,000 is available, they can use it for what it was intended for. Is that right?
Well,
Correct.
we can only submit invoices to FDOT for direct employees. So we have salaries for the board, we have salaries for Rosanna, and we submit that as it's incurred. So that's why we haven't drawn down all of it, is because we have a small operating budget. So we're submitting those invoices as the commissioners are paid, as Rosanna's paid. And when David was being paid, his salary was helping us to draw down the funds faster. And that's why Pierce said at one point that if David wasn't with us, even though we didn't have a revenue stream to pay him, it was kind of a dilemma because we had no recurring revenue to pay David, but because of his salary being so high, it was allowing us to draw down the ARPA funding faster. And Pierre was concerned at one point that we may not draw it all down. But hopefully I stated that correctly, Pierre.
I guess, so my question is, do you need anything from us to be able to draw this down, the remaining amount?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the question is, if Commissioner Hill, if you want to pay the employees, that can be done.
Right. And that's what I'd like to see is just, and I know at one point we did this, was had a list of the employees that, are the frontline workers. And just so that we know approximately how much we would be able to pay each one. So we know how many employees we're talking about. And these would have to be folks that were with us, during COVID and are still obviously there.
So obviously if we did this, if we decided to pay the employees, obviously we'd need W-9s from each employee. So, or social security information and address information so that we could issue the Ocean Island Port Authority issue would essentially issue the employees 1099s at the end of the year for any amounts they decided to pay them. So, but yeah, I mean, the first is how many years and how many employees, obviously, and how much.
Well, alternatively, couldn't they receive a payment from from Savage, and then Savage provides us a list of those employees and we use our operating budget, like we do a budget amendment and say we're going to approve the payment to Savage?
Sure, yeah. If Savage is willing, or Nassau Terminals, I'm assuming, is willing to do that, sure.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe we can have a separate discussion, Greg, and Kyle, about that in the next week or so. Well, it'll probably be after the 10th. So maybe we'll plan to talk about it at the next meeting. I think that's important. It's not right, you make a promise to your employees that they're going to share in this, and I know they may have received other funds, which is fine, but the OPA board made that commitment, and that's what I'm worried about. That's my
Yeah, and
job.
I'll just say, I think, because when we discussed it previously, Nassau Terminals may have received a PPP loan, which was forgiven. That doesn't necessarily mean it flowed directly to the employees' pockets, like we're talking about here, right? So here we're talking about a direct payment to the employees, flowing directly to the employees to their pockets. The PPP loan was essentially securing that employment, making sure they stayed employed, and the money flowed to the employer, and it did not necessarily flow to the employees themselves.
Right. Well, and that's good information to have, because at the time we didn't really know what was being submitted or paid out. And
Yeah, I think because I think we'd confirmed that Nassau Terminals received the PPP loan, because that's publicly available information.
I remember the newspaper articles.
Well,
Oh.
just tell us what you need, and
Okay.
and we'll work with you to draw it down if you want to draw down the rest or spend the rest.
Yeah, I guess what I'd be looking for is just a list of the employees that are still there, that were, still that were employed during the pandemic at some point, even if it was just for a day during the pandemic. So it'd be folks that are still there on site, and just so we know how many we're talking about, and then we'll have a sense of what
And
we could pay each employee. Because I know I think we made an actual dollar commitment in our public meeting, but I don't remember what the
And-
folks that were putting that forward what amount we had said. Go ahead, Pierre.
So, and then do we want to know length of service? Is the payout going to vary based on length of service? So if you have that information, Greg, employee and then hire date or length of service.
What are we calling the last day of COVID?
Great question. I think every person will give you a different answer.
I think
But
officially,
I have
if you
no
look
sense
at
of
it,
time since COVID, so does time really matter?
I think officially in Florida in November of 2020.
Yeah.
Was. And I know that because obviously we do a lot of the pandemic ERC, a lot of, and I think officially the state of whatever, the emergency or from the governor's office was lifted in November of 2020.
Okay, we'll call it November 30th, 2020, the last day of COVID, and give you a list of everybody that's still there that was employed prior to that date. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you. Sorry for going backward.
Okay, and I put this one last because Rosanna mentioned there were some questions. So this is just the new grant that was funded by FDOT to develop 2 concepts and cost estimates for a future CBP, where will they go next type thing. So it's $25,000 of state funds, requires $8,333 match by OPA, and the grant runs through 2026.
Hey, Kyle, I can speak to part of that. at the operation, we received an invoice for the first half of this. So we're working on that payment with OHPA so we can go ahead and submit for the first part of the reimbursement. And then as far as, where the project is or making a decision, I believe OHPA is still working through that part. I was not at the last meeting.
One thing we need to look at this one, because I know there was some confusion between this CBP grant and the CBP IT grant. This grant, I think somehow the work on this grant may have gotten slightly ahead of the grant itself. Like I think y'all executed an agreement with a contractor in February or an architecture firm, and this grant didn't actually start till April 12th. So I just want everyone to be aware that we can't pay any charges incurred prior to April 12th. So beginning April 12th forward, if charges were incurred, we can reimburse for those. But if work occurred prior to the execution of a grant, it's ineligible. We reimbursed by DOT.
Yeah, we had some issues with this grant. This was during the handoff from David Kaufman, and it's always a learning curve for us taking up a new duties between myself and Rosanna, and I'll take the blame. It was definitely not on Rosanna's side. She's excellent at coordinating. But in that discussion with David, we understood that we could have multiple alternatives. That was the direction from the board. And I guess that didn't just trickle down all the way to what was communicated in the grant application. So we were always looking for more than 2 alternatives. And so then the board wanted to expand it, and we determined we weren't able to. And so that the timeline was a little protracted on that one. So apologies for some of the confusion there just in that handoff. But I think the contractor knows that nothing can be billed before the grant agreement was actually signed. I think that's been communicated multiple times.
If y'all will just gatekeep that as you're doing the invoice, then we'll check it closely once y'all submit it as well to make sure their dates the work actually occurred on fall within the eligible dates.
Okay.
Rosanna, what's
This is a good one just as an example, just so y'all know when y'all, because most of y'all's funding at this point seems to come through FSTED, that we interpret whatever y'all submit. And I think this one kind of showed that it's literal. So if y'all write, we're going to develop 2 concepts, we interpret it as 2 exactly, not 1, not 3, but 2. So make sure when you're doing your FSTED stuff, it's kind of a balancing act. You want to be your scope and project description wants to be accurate enough that FSTED understands what you're doing and approves it. But at some point, you may be better not to say the word 2, but to say multiple, like use something that's slightly ambiguous. So just words matter on those FSTED applications. So just kind of, as y'all are putting those together, be very cognizant of the language you're using.
Yeah, and I really, if we're hiring a consultant, we didn't want to steer them toward a result. And that was one of the issues we had, was that, the board had a certain direction, but then they were being steered toward a result for whatever reason that didn't reflect what the board had voted on. And so that's why there was just a bit of back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think we got a good, we got a good work product. So hopefully it'll be a good lesson learned.
Rosanna, wasn't this the one where we only spent like $14,000 or something? Or
Yes, I received an invoice for $14,000.
is that all we're going to spend on this grant? So
No.
this work is, we're spending it
That's-
all?
I think so.
Okay. I thought we were
Kyle
looking-
Clark, can you confirm that?
Yeah, so we're working on verifying the date of that first one because that'll affect this answer. But assuming that the date on the first one is good, then we're going to use this entire thing.
Okay. Yeah, I thought there was a question about using this in grant and we wanted to repurpose it, but not yet. Okay, we'll wait.
Yeah, work was stopped on this project and then restarted again on April 12th, as soon as the grant was executed.
So we were also told by David, sorry to harp on it, but he also told us that there was like a timeline that it was expiring, right? And it's not.
I really wonder if David got his seat, and I don't know this, but just trying to piece this together. if he got his CBP grants mixed up, because I think there was a finite amount of time left on the CBP IT grant.
That's right. That's right.
And so I could see a scenario where he, both CBP projects kind of confuse the timelines, maybe.
Right. Well, and that's why it's good to have like a written record of, communication. That way you can, I know some people don't like writing things down, but when you put it in writing, it's a good historian for everybody of what happens. So at least for me. Okay. Thank you.
So that's it for the grants. That's all we have. A few of these will roll off and the presentations will get, because several of them are expiring or closed. So this presentation of the next few months will probably be like 3, 4, or 5 projects in total. So it should be pretty quick at our monthly meetings.
Kyle Kaufman, I have a question. So any funding that we're seeking moving forward, we need to submit it in CSIP, correct?
Correct.
Whether it's federal or state?
I don't know that there's a requirement to, like, if you're pursuing say y'all went after another MARAD grant. I don't think there's any requirement for a federally funded only project to be in there, but if it's anything you intend to be funded through DOT or FDOT, step 1 is it has to be in CSIP.
Okay,
I
because
don't believe on some of the other modes, like in airports, we share an interface with FAA. I don't believe MARAD or USDOT has access to CSIP.
Okay. We have the CBP facility construction coming and the resiliency plan. So
I would imagine, and I can get the month. I think did Lauren Rand meet with a group of y'all recently? We did have a meeting with y'all, right? She kind of went over timeline. So FSTED will be having a call for projects over the next few months. So I would imagine those 2 would probably be 2 that would be high at y'all's list to submit for funding.
Yes, we
correct.
did do that call and we identified 4 projects we wanted to look for funding on.
Okay.
I heard the June 17th deadline. Is that not the right deadline?
Let me see if I have a hard deadline. I'll have to owe you an answer on that one and see if they published a formal date. I will find out and let you know on that one. Rosanna, let me track that info down and I'll send it to you, Rosanna, and if you can distribute it out to the group, I guess. I'll find out that application dates.
So Greg and Kyle, just from a high level, I know we want to keep moving the customs project forward, and that's a rehab scenario and has its constraints, and you probably are already getting a sense of how that project might flow. And then we have the resiliency initiatives, which are pretty massive. How do you see like the needs? What's our priority, or do we need to do both in tandem?
Yeah, I think we do both in tandem. They're both important.
Yeah. So in terms of applying for those grants, the resiliency draft that we received, that's a great first start to the grant application process for resiliency. And then we have the output from Ziskovich for the customs. Are we going to hire a consultant, or how is that process going to be managed?
Yeah, I think we would look to hire Blue Jay Advisors again, who just did this EPA grant, and get them. We actually have another option to get them to draft an application and put everything together for us. I think it'd be a lot smaller, lighter lift than the EPA grant.
Okay. So we need to start including those items on our agendas for approval by the board, and we need like corresponding grant agreements. So if we have, yeah, just so that we're
what
not doing a fire
approvals-
drill.
Yeah, I agree. What approvals are needed? Like, do
Well,
we, I don't think we need
there's
to,
application for the grant that has to be approved by OPA. And
Okay.
then the grant agreement between OPA and Nassau Terminals. And then there's a grant agreement with FDOT.
okay.
And the resiliency funding, could you just tell us a little bit about that, Kyle?
I was gonna, where have y'all heard about resiliency fund? I know that I think FSTED has deemed some resiliency stuff eligible. I don't know, and maybe I'm misinformed. I don't know that they have a separate pool of funding specifically reserved for resiliency projects.
Yeah, so we were working, Jim McDonald with HNTB. He had prepared an initial like resiliency report, like more like a master plan type document.
Okay.
And I think there was a pot of funding that was allocated to pay his organization, to pay HNTB as a consultant to do these analysis at the different ports in Florida. And I thought that he said there was a special grant for resiliency, that this was funded through federal funding, and that it had a very aggressive match. I thought he said something like 90%.
Let me research what I remember. I know the ancient so this is the one that I think Lauren Rand paid for out of her consultant contract to have the study done at the port, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
I think the idea, she did that for y'all, and I want to say maybe one or two or three other ports, was to get you in a place where you kind of had an assessment of what was needed. And then from that point, the idea would be to pursue some of these new federal programs that are out there for resiliency, some federal grant programs. But that would be OPA pursuing something directly with MARAD, USDOT, or EPA, like y'all have recently done. Something like that. I don't know that it would be DOT or FSTED funded.
Okay, so it's not going to flow through the state. It's going to be direct.
I will verify that there's no funding pool for resiliency that I'm unaware of that maybe FSTED has, but I don't believe there is.
Okay.
And I just so everyone knows, I sent Rosanna an email just now. The date of those applications is June 17th.
Well, thank you for the support on the resiliency planning piece, having that information at hand, even though it's still, I think, technically in draft form at this point, and we are kind of on a crunch, but having that information is so valuable to the application process, because it stakes our claim in, what the issues are at the port, with the rail line and flooding and erosion. So it was very comprehensive. I thought they did a very good job.
Is the city still marching forward with, I know they had some big waterfront plans to kind of put in some flood barriers and.
No,
is that still going forward?
No, they just passed a budget that does not include the bond referendum. Yeah.
I was a little worried that they go build up their side of the waterfront, and then y'all are kind of left as the lowest point on the waterfront, naturally where the water would end up. So.
Yeah, we would. I mean, I really do think we would need to coordinate with the city. It's just, I don't really see a way around it. And the rail line runs across both waterfronts. So there is kind of a high point there in between, but yeah, there isn't a way to do it without coordinating with the city. And I frankly, I don't know why we would, but
y'all
avoid coordinating with
a federal case if the port, the city, and the railroad banded together to pursue some of these as a team. I've just seen people do very well with USDOT when you kind of have like a multimodal,
right,
cross-functional team working for one goal. Those types of projects seem to do well.
Well, and I mean, I think what the city had put together to do their bond referendum, it's quite an undertaking, but there isn't a lot of support for it at this point.
Yep.
And so if we can sort of pull all of that together, it may be that we can benefit the rail line, the connectivity, and the downtown would benefit, but I don't know how much of that OPA can take on.
Yeah, it's to
So
put together a coalition like that, it's a lot of time and effort, but
we'll keep plugging forward. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I
I
didn't
have
have any other
one,
questions.
sorry, I have one quick question. Kyle Kaufman, what was the name of this funding that we would be applying for that's applications are due June 17th? What pool of money is this?
it's the Florida, oh my gosh, I might get the acronym wrong. It's the Florida Seaport Economic Development Trust Fund, which I may have butchered that, but commonly referred to as FSTED. And it's a board, it's a kind of a organization within DOT, and it comprised of one representative from each port, the state secretary of transportation, and the state secretary of the Department of Commerce. And they get between 25 and $35 million a year right off the top that they have complete control over. That board votes on which projects that funding is applied to. So that this will be an every year thing that happens. They meet twice a year. Funding's usually allocated at their summer meeting, I believe.
Okay.
So you'll turn in
Very
applications in June, and then you'll have a meeting, I think, usually around August, where they allocate the funding.
Okay, is this just a once a year cycle?
It is a once a year cycle that will run on a pretty consistent timeline.
And are we thinking, Miriam, are we thinking that the CBP funding and the resiliency funding could all be from this fund?
Well, resiliency, I'm not sure about the CDP
Okay,
customs office. I'm just not sure how that, I'd have to look at the grant description, like the purpose of the funding, to see whether or not that would fit.
okay.
If y'all have any questions, I would encourage you to call FSTED. They seem pretty helpful for people to kind of bounce ideas off as you're working up a list of potential projects of which ones may do well and which ones may not. I've seen them provide some pretty helpful guidance in the past.
Is that Mark Rubin? Where is Mark Rubin from?
He's at the Florida Ports Council.
Oh, okay.
They are, I say FSTED. So the Florida Ports Council is FSTED's administrative vendor who handles the day-to-day running, because it's not like the representatives from each port can be there every day, and the state secretary of DOT can be there every day. So they hire essentially a consultant firm to kind of run the day-to-day operations, and that is Mike Rubin and FPC.
Okay, got it. Okay, I don't have any more questions.
Clear as mud, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So slightly clearer.
Yeah, it's all these non-governmental organizations, like similar with like TPO is a non-for-profit, right? But TPO has a consortium of elected officials who approve FDOT's plan. So it's a way to have public engagement and involvement from the ports and representation in the divvying up of the funding, but to not have it directly divvied up by FSTED.
Got it. Got
At
it.
least on the FPC side. So it's a good partnership. That's the way I would call it.
Perfect. All right, I'll get in touch with Andy on our side, and we'll start working towards an application for June 17th then.
So it just needs to be in CSEP, and then I think y'all have to send a formal letter to FPC, FSTED by that date. And then I think in the past, and this is not my concern, it's however y'all do it, I think OPA's board has okayed the applications, or at least blessed the applications before they went in.
Right, which means the June 12th meeting. This needs to be on the agenda, and we need to have seen the application.
And then we had an issue, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where Worldwide submitted some stuff that I think maybe the board hadn't seen, and it definitely caused some community issues.
Yeah, it's, I think the issues were that the application said that there had been public outreach and there had been, committee meetings and individuals were on committees and there was, public buy-in and none of that effort had actually occurred. And it was pretty easy to validate that it hadn't occurred because the people that were supposedly on those committees were shaking their head no. But yeah, if we want to have public engagement, it's clear to me that we wouldn't necessarily have the time for that at this point, but we need a plan for it. And I appreciate that that's how you presented it with the EPA grant, because, we can do the public engagements necessary to make sure that the execution aligns. It's just not getting out over our skis and representing that we've already done all of that and it's shovel ready, which wouldn't be fair.
And y'all seem to do a fair amount of public engagement with your master plan process too.
Well, and
So
like with this meeting, to have this as a public meeting, there are members of the public that watch and they learn in the process, and I think it's positive. But I appreciate you joining in this fashion because it does educate members of the community on all the things that OPA does and that Nassau Terminals does in the background, in terms of planning, and I think it's great. It's public money, right?
If we want to do this in the future and do this quarterly, or or if y'all want me to come up and come to a board meeting once a quarter or something, we can certainly work that out. I am in the process of hiring a seaport coordinator, so hopefully in the next month or two, we'll have a dedicated person doing this again, and they can do it full time, whereas I'm kind of a part-time effort at this point.
Well, I think we'll take you up on that, Kyle. And I also like this format via Zoom if it's more convenient for you to join. And thank you, Greg and Kyle Clark. Thank you for everybody and Pierre coming on.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's a very helpful meeting to keep organized.
Perfect. Well, if anyone has any follow-up questions, I think everyone's got my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.